Welcome to Sleepy Journeys, the podcast designed to lull you into a peaceful slumber with soothing stories through time, places, and ideas. Whether you're winding down after a long day or simply looking for a peaceful escape, you were in the right place. My name's Jack, and I'm so happy to have you here with me. Each night on Sleepy Journeys, we set off together on gentle adventures designed to soothe your mind and ease you into rest. You'll find journeys through history, comforting fairy tales, myths and folklore, the wonders of science, fascinating inventions, inspiring famous figures, music history, and even calm explorations around the world. No matter where your curiosity takes you, there's a dreamy Sleepy Journeys show for you. Tonight, we're going to embark on a gentle journey through brain-computer interfaces, the future of thought. So get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin. Imagine you're lying on a soft hillside, the stars just beginning to blink into view above you. The earth is still warm beneath the grass, and the sky, an endless tapestry of velvet blue, hums quietly with the hush of night. Thoughts drift lazily through your mind like wisps of fog, and you watch them come and go, peaceful and slow. Now imagine if those thoughts, barely formed, could be shared, not by speaking, not by writing, but simply by existing. This is the softly shimmering world of brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, a place where science gently meets imagination and where the quiet language of your mind begins to find its voice. Long ago, no one imagined that we could one day listen to thoughts as though they were music, playing just beneath the surface of the skin. But the brain, with all its quiet complexity, has always whispered its rhythms through tiny electrical patterns. Neurons, like stars, flash and pause and pulse in delicate patterns, creating an internal symphony that until recently only the self could hear. But now, in calm, thoughtful laboratories and sunlit research rooms, scientists are beginning to listen more closely. And what they're hearing is breathtaking. Not loud, not jarring, but soft and subtle. Like the hush of wind through a field of reeds, or the faint pulse of waves far out to sea. These are the thoughts beneath the thoughts, the ones that BCIs are gently learning to hear. As we drift through tonight's episode, we won't race through breakthroughs or sprint toward the future. Instead, we'll meander, slowly and steadily, through the delicate pathways of neural signals, early experiments, and the warm dreams of a future where thought and technology intertwine as softly as fingers woven together in rest. We'll begin with the nature of thought itself, those shimmering sparks that live in the dark forests of our minds. Then we'll float toward the very first efforts to understand and capture them through machines that could listen to the brain's quiet song. We'll explore how these systems not only read from the brain, but whisper back to it, helping people to move, to feel, to see again. We'll wander gently through the lives they touch, those who find their voices once more through BCIs, and we'll reflect on the vast, open questions about identity, connection, and the boundaries between ourselves and the machines we create. But all of this, all of it, will come softly. This is not a place for intensity, nor urgency. It is a place for rest, for wandering and wondering, for imagining a world where the line between thought and action is as gentle as the space between dreaming and waking. So, as the night wraps itself gently around you, and your breath slows like a river easing toward the sea, let yourself drift into the story, into the science, into the quiet marvel of brain-computer interfaces. The future of thought awaits. In the vast quiet of the night sky, stars glimmer gently, some twinkling faintly, others burning steadily, each one a point of light in an infinite ocean of darkness. Now, imagine that instead of stars, you're gazing upon a forest of neurons, billions of tiny branching trees, glowing softly in the stillness of your mind. This is your brain's landscape. A quiet, flickering cosmos, full of thought and light, working steadily beneath the surface of every breath, every blink, every drifting dream. Neurons are the soft storytellers of the brain. Each one reaches out with delicate tendrils called dendrites, like tiny fingers extending to touch the thoughts of others. They send their messages down long, narrow axons, which act like silent riverways, carrying signals from one neuron to the next. These messages are quiet and electric, faint pulses known as action potentials, tiny flashes that leap from cell to cell, telling the body when to move, when to rest, when to remember a name or forget a worry. But these pulses don't act alone. Like the stars in a constellation, they form patterns, networks, a gentle choreography of firing and pausing, surging and silencing. Even in rest, the brain is alive with this inner starlight, a whispering network of energy that quietly forms the basis of your thoughts, your sensations, your awareness of being. The signals themselves are fleeting, each one no more than a spark, but they leave behind impressions, much like the afterglow of a shooting star. As these impressions accumulate, they form memories, sensations, emotions. And while we often think of thoughts as something vague or abstract, the truth is they have structure. A beginning, a middle, a quiet ending. Every idea you have is a pathway, a trail through the forest of your brain, marked not with footprints, but with flickers. Scientists have long known about these patterns, but it was only in recent decades that they began to understand their quiet language. By placing tiny sensors on the scalp, or even inside the brain itself, researchers began to listen, not loudly, not forcefully, but patiently over time. Like astronomers peering through telescopes, they began to see the shapes of mental constellations. A flicker here meant movement. A pulse there meant attention. A pause might indicate sleep, or calm, or peace. And so they started to map it, not with compasses, but with electrodes. Not with ink, but with voltage. Slowly, gently, the map of the brain's electricity began to emerge. It wasn't exact. It never is. But even imperfectly, this gentle understanding opened the door to a dream. What if we could read the mind, not by invading it, but by simply observing the starlight? It is here, in this soft and curious question, that our story truly begins. For brain-computer interfaces are not a story of control, but of conversation. Not a loud demand from technology, but a soft invitation to listen. And before we can listen, we must first understand the quiet ways the mind speaks to itself, in patterns, in pulses, in the glowing night sky of neural light. As you lie still, eyes closed, body nestled into the softness beneath you, your mind begins to slow. Thoughts that once danced quickly across your awareness begin to float, gentle and unhurried, like leaves drifting across a calm lake. This slowing is not just a feeling. It is a physical change within the brain, a quiet shifting of rhythms, from the busy murmurs of wakefulness to the deep waves of sleep. The brain, even when it appears to be at rest, is never truly silent. It hums softly and continuously in patterns of activity that rise and fall like the tide. These patterns are known as brain waves, and they reflect the collective activity of neurons, millions of them, moving in synchrony, as though breathing in and out together in the dark. In the waking state, your brain emits fast, fine waves called beta waves. These are the ripples of attention, concentration, and thought. They sparkle quickly, like sunlight on water, shifting and shimmering as you think, react, and plan. But as your mind begins to relax, as it does now, those waves begin to change. The rhythm slows, the pattern deepens. Alpha waves take over, gently rolling, soft and broad. These are the waves of stillness, of rest without sleep, like sitting beneath a tree and letting your gaze drift skyward. They signal a mind that is open, calm, and unwound. And as you sink deeper still, the waves grow slower yet. Theta waves emerge, like long ocean swells under moonlight. These are the waves of drowsiness, of dreaming, of entry into the liminal world where wakefulness fades and sleep begins. Finally, in the deepest stages of sleep, your brain becomes a sea of delta waves, slow, strong, and steady. These are the foundation of deep rest. They move through your brain like gentle tides through underwater valleys, restoring and repairing, washing away the debris of the day. In this place, your thoughts are distant. Time stretches. You are held, not by gravity, but by quiet. Brain-computer interface researchers have learned to recognize these waves, each type a different brushstroke in the portrait of the mind. By measuring the frequency and strength of these signals through EEG devices, they begin to understand what state the brain is in, even without asking. This is why early BCI experiments often began with sleep studies, because in sleep, the brain speaks with clarity. Not in words, but in waves. And so, BCIs became listeners, not of speech or behavior, but of brainwaves. In doing so, they entered a world that is not bound by language or motion, but by quiet intention. A world where thoughts are not spoken aloud, but ripple softly beneath the surface of consciousness. As you rest now, your own waves are shifting too. They move slowly, tenderly, from beta to alpha, from alpha to theta. You are floating on your own neural tide, drifting into sleep as gently as a leaf follows the wind. And the technology that follows your thoughts, it does not rush. It does not intrude. It simply listens. Like a moon drawn close to the ocean, it feels the pull of your mind and learns to follow. Picture a quiet room in the early 20th century. The air is still, filled with a kind of scientific reverence. A subject sits motionless, a gentle wire cap placed atop their head. Around them, paper scrolls through a machine, marking its surface with thin, wavy lines, soft echoes of the mind, recorded for the very first time. This is the beginning of a long and gentle story, the story of how we first learned to listen to the brain's quiet hum. In 1924, a German psychiatrist named Hans Berger made a discovery that would ripple across decades. Using a technique he called electroencephalography, EEG, he was able to record the electrical activity of the human brain. At the time, it seemed almost magical. These small waves, etched onto paper, were not random. They had rhythm, structure, a whispering language of their own. Berger saw in them a dream of communication beyond words, a subtle way to peer into the inner life of the mind. The EEG did not shout, it whispered. It picked up the faintest electrical signals, just microvolts of activity from the scalp. No need for cuts or probes. No harshness. Just soft sensors resting like petals on the skin. The early EEGs revealed the graceful undulations of alpha waves during rest and the sharper flickers of beta waves during focus. Each curve was a clue. Each wave a gentle insight into the state of a person's mind. Though the equipment was delicate and the interpretations imperfect, the implications were vast. For the first time, science could observe the mind without needing the subject to move, to speak, or even to be awake. EEGs were soon used in sleep studies, in the diagnosis of epilepsy, and in research on attention and fatigue. Wherever the brain's rhythms varied, the EEG could follow, like a quiet companion walking beside a stream. But it wasn't until the late 20th century that a new kind of idea began to take shape, a soft, daring thought. What if the EEG could not only record thoughts, but help transform them into actions? What if a person's brainwaves could become a means of control? The earliest experiments were tentative, like a child testing new steps. Subjects were asked to imagine moving their left or right hand. The EEG, if calibrated carefully, could detect the subtle shift in brain activity linked to that imagined motion. These shifts were translated into binary choices, yes or no, left or right. Over time, with enough practice, people could move a cursor across a screen or select a letter from a menu, just by thinking. The bridge between thought and action had begun to form, not loudly, not with certainty, but with flickers. Tiny, quiet flickers that held within them the possibility of something new, a world where intention itself could become a kind of touch. These first EEG-based BCIs were slow, simple, and limited. But like the earliest fires in the dark, they brought warmth and wonder. They invited people to imagine a future not bound by voice or motion. A future where the brain's quiet rhythms could reach outward and gently shape the world. And though the path ahead was long, the spark had been lit. A spark born not of noise or force, but of stillness and of listening. In a quiet laboratory, perhaps filled with the soft hum of computers and the steady blink of monitors, a researcher leans forward. Across the room, a participant sits calmly, their gaze fixed not on the researcher, but on a small dot on a screen. Electrodes rest lightly against their scalp, connected by thin cords that stretch like delicate vines to a nearby device. The researcher gives no instruction aloud. Instead, they simply wait and observe. The participant does not speak. They do not lift a finger. Instead, they imagine. They imagine moving the dot to the left. No muscle moves, no breath quickens, but within the folds of their brain, something gentle stirs. A shift, a flicker, a subtle change in the rhythm of neurons. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dot begins to glide across the screen. This moment, though quiet, is monumental. The dot is not moved by hands or voice, but by thought alone. In the 1990s and early 2000s, researchers around the world began to build upon the foundations laid by early EEG studies. They envisioned systems where brain activity could directly interface with machines, creating a feedback loop where thought and response could coexist in harmony. These systems were primitive at first, sensitive to noise, slow to react, but they represented the birth of true brain-computer interfaces. The earliest versions often required users to undergo long training sessions. Participants learned to regulate specific brainwave patterns, perhaps increasing their alpha waves when relaxed, or generating motor imagery, such as picturing the movement of a hand or foot. Over time, algorithms learned to detect these patterns with greater precision. Slowly, the system and the mind began to understand each other. One such breakthrough came in the form of cursor control. Users could learn to guide a mouse pointer across a screen simply by thinking about directional movement. This was not a matter of direct telepathy. It was more like steering a boat through invisible currents. The brain would send a subtle signal, the system would respond, and the user would adjust. Back and forth, the two would learn to communicate. Gently, iteratively, patiently. What made these systems so profound was not their speed or efficiency, but their promise. For people who had lost the ability to speak or move due to paralysis, stroke, or conditions like ALS, these interfaces offered more than utility. They offered hope. Hope that thoughts, even unspoken, could be heard. Early demonstrations captured the imagination. A user selecting letters from a virtual keyboard, composing short messages. Another playing a simple video game. Another turning on lights in a room, choosing channels on a television, or moving a robotic arm. Each action was quiet, deliberate, and driven entirely by intention. Of course, these systems were far from perfect. The signals were fragile, and the technology required constant calibration. But the breakthroughs were undeniable. The dream of a brain communicating directly with a computer was no longer just science fiction. It was happening, gently and carefully, in labs around the world. And so, a new kind of bridge began to form. Not built of stone or steel, but of thought and signal. A bridge where minds reached out, not to shout commands, but to express quiet desires, to connect, to act. It was the beginning of something softly revolutionary. Subsection 2.31 Non-invasive harmony, EEG caps and neural decoding. Imagine a smooth, lightweight cap, something like a swimmer might wear, resting gently on your head. Embedded within its fabric are tiny, soft sensors, each one poised like a listener at the edge of a forest, attentive to the faintest rustle in the trees. This cap doesn't press or intrude. It simply rests, patient and quiet, waiting to feel the gentle electrical breezes that move across the scalp. This is a non-invasive EEG system, one of the most common tools in the world of brain-computer interfaces. Unlike surgical implants or deep neural probes, these devices ask nothing of your body beyond presence. You simply sit, breathe, and think. The rest is listening. The sensors within these caps detect the delicate electrical fields that rise from the collective firing of neurons. These fields are impossibly small, measured in microvolts, and they change with your thoughts, your attention, your mood. But to the trained algorithms within the BCI system, these patterns are not chaos. They are clues. With time and care, they become language. Early EEG caps required gels to reduce resistance, sticky substances that helped the electrodes maintain close contact with the scalp. But as technology advanced, dry electrodes began to take shape, comfortable, reusable, and able to pick up signals even through a strand of hair. This made BCIs more practical for everyday use, removing one more barrier between the mind and the machine. The process of neural decoding, the art of interpreting brain signals, relies on pattern recognition. A user might think of moving their hand. The EEG detects a subtle shift in rhythm, often in the sensori-motor cortex. Machine learning models, trained on these patterns, match the thought with an intended action. It isn't instant, nor is it perfect. But over time, the model learns. It adapts. And in return, the user learns to think more clearly, more precisely. It becomes a gentle partnership. The user doesn't need to force their thoughts. There is no strain, no loudness in the mind. Just calm focus. Like practicing a musical instrument, the more you try, the more fluid the motion becomes. Not through muscles, but through intention. Non-invasive BCIs have found homes not only in labs, but in classrooms, in rehabilitation centers, even in art installations. Artists have used EEG caps to create paintings guided by their mood. Musicians have composed soundscapes shaped by their brainwaves. And researchers have explored how focus and distraction shift the patterns across the scalp, revealing hidden landscapes within the mind. What makes this approach so powerful is its simplicity. No surgery, no recovery time, just a gentle cap, a quiet listener, and a mind open to exploration. And so, the brain speaks, softly, invisibly, across the surface of the skin. And the computer listens, not with expectation, but with patience. Together, they form a duet of thought and code, a quiet conversation that unfolds wordlessly. It's in this space, this harmony between thought and detection, that the promise of non-invasive BCIs truly shines. A promise that thinking alone, clear, calm, and focused, can one day guide machines as naturally as hands once did. Beneath the quiet surface of the skull, where thought pulses softly like a distant tide, lies a more intimate world of connection, one where the boundary between technology and mind becomes almost imperceptibly thin. Here, deep within the folds of the brain, the most sensitive whispers of thought reside. And for those who seek the most precise understanding of this inner world, another kind of interface is gently used: the implanted electrode. Unlike EEG caps that rest atop the head, these devices are placed carefully beneath the skin, often just millimeters from the neurons they observe. The process is delicate, guided by the steady hands of neurosurgeons and the supportive hum of monitors. Once in place, the electrodes listen, closely, quietly, to the signals that flow like streams through neural pathways. What they hear is astonishingly detailed. Each electrode, as thin as a human hair, can detect the activity of individual neurons or small groups of cells. This level of precision allows researchers to decode not just general intentions, but specific motions, like the idea of lifting a finger or turning the eyes. The signals they receive are sharp and strong, like hearing a heartbeat from within, rather than through a stethoscope pressed against the chest. The most well-known of these systems is the Utah Array, a grid of tiny electrodes that nestles gently into the surface of the brain. Though it sounds mechanical, it is more like a whispering net, delicately tuned to catch the lightest flickers of mental activity. When a person thinks of moving their hand, the array captures the neuronal sparks that correspond to that intention. A computer translates this information in real time, allowing for the direct control of a cursor, a robotic arm, or even a digital voice. For people with severe paralysis, these systems offer more than precision. They offer access. Access to expression, to agency, to the soft return of choice. Some have used implanted BCIs to send emails, play music, or communicate their needs for the first time in years. The movements are not fast, but they are deliberate. Each action is a triumph of quiet determination and delicate engineering. And yet, even here, the interface does not demand. It does not force. It listens. It adapts. It waits. The relationship between user and device is one of mutual trust, built over time, shaped by both biology and algorithm. Of course, implants are not without their challenges. They require surgery. They carry risks. Over time, scar tissue may form around the electrodes, dulling their sensitivity. Power and signal transmission must be managed carefully, often through small ports in the skull or wireless systems just beneath the skin. But researchers are steadily improving these technologies, making them smaller, safer, more durable. Some are even developing electrodes as soft and flexible as threads, able to bend and move with the brain itself. In this deeper realm, BCIs begin to feel less like tools and more like companions, embedded within the mind's own rhythms, gently extending its reach. Here, the line between thought and machine fades into something more like a shared current, flowing beneath awareness. It is a profound quietude, this act of thought made action through silence. And for many, it is the first time the world hears what they have long been thinking, without ever saying a word. Subsection 0.4.1 Stimulating silence. How BCIs can write to neurons. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a still pond. Its surface is calm, mirroring the sky above. Now, picture a single droplet falling, barely a sound, but ripples spread out in soft concentric circles. In much the same way, the brain can be touched, not with pressure or force, but with tiny pulses of energy that ripple through its quiet waters. This is the subtle practice of neural stimulation, the act of not just listening to the brain, but gently speaking back. For many years, brain-computer interfaces focused on decoding thought, on listening to the brain's electric song. But just as any good conversation involves both speaking and listening, scientists soon wondered, could we send information into the brain as well? Could we write to neurons as softly as we read from them? The answer came slowly, through decades of careful exploration. It began with techniques like deep brain stimulation, where electrodes were placed deep within specific regions of the brain to help manage conditions like Parkinson's disease. These pulses were rhythmic and consistent, barely noticeable to the patient, yet enough to calm the storm of tremors or intrusive thoughts. From there, researchers moved to more refined methods. Instead of broad stimulation, they began crafting pulses that could mimic natural neural activity. With precise timing and placement, they could guide a brain region into behaving more normally, soothing hyperactive circuits or awakening those gone quiet. In BCIs, this kind of stimulation became a way not just to manage illness, but to return sensation. Consider a person with a spinal cord injury, unable to feel their legs, even though the legs remain intact. By connecting a BCI to sensors on the body, and then relaying that sensory information to the brain through gentle stimulation, the person can begin to feel once more. Not perfectly, not immediately, but enough. Enough to begin. The process is called sensory feedback. It's like tapping the shoulder of the mind, reminding it that the body still speaks. Scientists have used it to restore a sense of touch in robotic limbs. When the robotic hand brushes an object, it sends a signal back to the brain. The user, in turn, feels a faint pressure. Not just cold data on a screen, but a lived sensation, reawakened through electricity and intention. This writing to the brain can take many forms. Some methods use implants, placing microelectrodes near sensory or motor regions. Others use transcranial magnetic stimulation, a gentle pulsing magnet placed against the skull that creates temporary activity within the brain. Still others use focused ultrasound, shaping sound into waves that nudge neurons into action. What's important is the care with which these signals are shaped. The brain is not a machine to be overridden. It is a landscape to be harmonized with. The goal is not to command, but to suggest. Not to force, but to remind. Like a lullaby hummed softly in the dark, the signals must be simple, safe, and soothing. And when they work, something quiet and extraordinary happens. The brain responds. It changes. It learns. In time, this kind of stimulation could help people with memory loss recall names. It could help restore lost senses, calm emotional storms, or even share information between people in new ways. But all of that is still a whisper on the wind, a future dream forming on the edge of the present. For now, we are only beginning to speak this new language. A language of pulses and patterns, of intention and care. A language where silence can be filled with meaning, and the quiet between neurons can be gently stirred into song. Imagine waking to a world where color is only memory, sound is a distant thought, and touch is a ghost that never reaches the skin. For many, this is not a dream, but daily life, lived without sight, without hearing, without the delicate sensations that quietly connect us to the world around us. But in the gentle world of brain-computer interfaces, scientists are learning to restore these senses, not by replacing them, but by softly rerouting them. By teaching the brain to see again, to hear again, to feel again, in new and remarkable ways. Let us begin with vision. Inside the brain lies the visual cortex, a region at the back of the head that processes the light and color and motion our eyes perceive. When someone loses their sight due to retinal damage, this part of the brain often remains untouched. It is waiting, like a dormant stage, for the lights to rise again. And with BCIs, that moment is beginning to arrive. Researchers have developed devices that bypass the damaged eye altogether. Small cameras mounted on glasses capture visual information and convert it into electrical signals. These signals are sent directly to the visual cortex through implanted electrodes. The result is not full sight, but impressions, flashes of light, basic shapes, movement. Users describe them like outlines drawn in sparks, or silhouettes gently glowing in the mind's eye. Crude, yes, but deeply meaningful. A doorway reopened. Sound, too, has found its gentle path home. Cochlear implants, though not new, are perhaps the most successful form of a BCI in daily life. These devices take in sound from the environment, convert it to electrical signals, and deliver those signals directly to the auditory nerve. Over time, the brain learns to interpret these new signals as sound. Voices return. Music drifts back in. A once silent world begins to hum again, softly, steadily, beautifully. More advanced systems go a step further. Instead of simply restoring hearing, they enhance it, filtering out background noise, amplifying only what the user wants to hear. It is a conversation between brain and machine, shaped by need and comfort, not by urgency. Then there is touch. The sense of touch is so deeply personal, so fundamental, that losing it can feel like losing part of oneself. But here too, BCIs are creating bridges. In robotic limbs controlled by thought, researchers have added sensory feedback, tiny electrodes that send signals back to the brain when the limb brushes against something. a squeeze, a vibration, the faint pressure of fabric. These sensations are not illusions. They are real signals, perceived by the brain and welcomed like old friends. And in even more delicate experiments, scientists have begun to explore how BCIs might help those who feel too much, people with chronic pain. By gently interrupting or redirecting pain signals before they reach full intensity, BCIs may one day ease suffering with a kindness that starts beneath the skin. None of these systems are perfect. They do not fully replace the lost sense, but they offer something quieter, something perhaps more profound, a return to presence, to feeling connected, to experiencing, once again, the softness of a voice, the glow of a window at dusk, the texture of a familiar fabric beneath the fingertips. These are the gentle victories of science, not loud triumphs, but tender ones. Restorations, rekindlings. And as the technology evolves, so too does the hope that one day no sense will ever be truly lost. Only waiting, patiently, quietly. For the moment, it is softly found again. Imagine being fully awake, fully aware, but unable to speak. Not because the words aren't there, but because the muscles that once carried them into the world no longer respond. You try to lift your hand, to blink, to nod, and nothing comes. You are there, wholly present, yet sealed inside your mind. This is the experience of being locked in, a condition so quiet, so complete, that it can go unnoticed by the world. And yet, even here, in the stillness, thoughts remain. They continue to form, like soft waves beneath ice. Hopes, memories, questions, fears. The need to communicate doesn't fade. It deepens. And into this profound silence, brain-computer interfaces are beginning to bring a gentle voice. The first signs of possibility came from the simplest of systems, those that allowed a person to select letters one at a time by altering their brainwaves. It began with yes or no questions, then choices on a screen. Slowly, painstakingly, users would compose messages. A hello, a thank you, a request for water. Each word a triumph, each sentence a breath of freedom. But the technology has advanced. Today, scientists are developing BCIs that can decode imagined speech, thoughts formed as if they were being spoken aloud, even when the mouth remains still. These systems listen to the motor cortex, the part of the brain involved in planning speech, and identify the patterns that would be associated with forming particular sounds. It's not magic. It's mathematics, signal processing, machine learning. But the outcome feels like magic all the same. In one remarkable case, a man who had not spoken in over a decade was able to communicate sentences in real time. Using an implanted array of electrodes and sophisticated decoding algorithms, he could think of the words he wanted to say, and the system would display them on a screen. Not merely a few choices, but personalized phrases, reconstructed from the silent rhythms of his thoughts. The key is practice. Like learning a new language, both the user and the interface adapt to each other. The BCI learns which patterns match which sounds. the user learns how to shape their thoughts more clearly, more deliberately. It becomes, over time, a form of speech. Slower than talking, but no less powerful. For those with ALS or traumatic injury, this ability is not simply helpful, it is life-altering. It means they can express pain, ask for music, speak to their loved ones, share memories, say, "I love you." The systems are still being refined. Speed, accuracy, and accessibility are all areas of continued research. But the core idea, that thought alone can become voice, is no longer a dream. It is a quietly unfolding reality. And in this unfolding, there is something deeply human. A reminder that even in silence, the mind does not sleep. It reaches out. It tries. It speaks. And now, someone listens. There's a kind of speech that doesn't pass through the lips, a whisper that never forms a sound. We do it all the time, thinking of what we might say in a conversation, rehearsing a phrase before it's spoken, reading in our minds without ever moving our mouths. This is imagined speech, a language within the self, spoken only in thought. And now, brain-computer interfaces are learning to listen to it. Unlike overt speech, imagined speech arises in the same areas of the brain, the motor and premotor cortices, the language networks nestled in Broca's and Wernicke's areas. When you silently think the word hello, your brain prepares the same neural choreography it would use to say it aloud. The mouth does not move, but the signal is there, a faint trace, like footprints in fresh snow, revealing your intent. BCIs that interpret imagined speech work by detecting these patterns. Users are asked to silently think of specific phonemes, basic sounds like ah, oo, or e. As they do, the system records their brain's electrical activity, often through EEG or implanted electrodes. With training, the interface learns to map these signals to known sounds, then to syllables, then to whole words. But interpreting imagined speech is like reading a river's current from the ripples it leaves behind. It takes time, patience, and subtlety. The signals are often faint, interwoven with the textures of mood, memory, and focus. Yet, even so, they are consistent enough to form a foundation. With help from deep learning and predictive modeling, BCIs are now able to guess, not just what the user meant to say, but what they might say next. These predictive interfaces work much like modern text prediction on phones or computers, but with one key difference: they are guided not by keystrokes, but by intention. The user thinks of a phrase, perhaps, "I am hungry." The system interprets "I," then offers suggestions: am, was, will be. The user selects, mentally confirming the right word. With each correct choice, the system becomes more fluent, more intuitive, more like a partner in conversation than a translator. What makes these systems so powerful is their ability to anticipate not just text, but context. They can adjust based on prior usage, emotional tone, and even patterns in neural activity that suggest fatigue or urgency. A user might think faster when excited, slower when tired. The system listens for these changes, gently adapting its pace, and offering support. Some experimental BCIs go even further. Instead of decoding imagined speech word by word, they try to understand the intent behind the thought. A desire for water might be translated as, "Please bring me a drink," even if the exact phrase was never thought. These models rely on semantic prediction, understanding the meaning behind the signal, not just its structure. The result is a quieter form of conversation, one without voice, but rich in expression, one where the user feels heard, not just processed, where technology fades into the background, allowing thought to move freely, like a soft breeze through an open window. And while the systems are still being refined, the path ahead is clear. It leads to a world where people speak not through force, but through presence. Not with urgency, but with clarity. A world where expression begins not at the mouth, but at the mind's quiet edge and flows outward with grace. In the quiet stillness of the mind, motion still lives. Even when the body cannot respond, the intention to move, lift a foot, bend a knee, reach for a hand, remains active, gently pulsing in the neural pathways, as if waiting for its turn. This hidden current, soft but steady, is what brain-computer interfaces are beginning to harness. And through it, the gift of motion is returning, not as it once was, but in new and quietly extraordinary ways. For someone who has lost a limb or become paralyzed, movement often becomes a memory. Muscles that once responded easily now lie dormant. Yet inside the brain, the maps of those movements still exist. The areas responsible for walking, grasping, turning, they continue to light up, even when the body no longer follows. It is this latent potential that BCIs tap into. Thought-controlled prosthetics begin by decoding those patterns of motor intention. A person thinks about moving their missing arm or flexing a hand, and the BCI detects the electrical echoes of that intent. These signals are then sent to a robotic limb or wearable device, which responds in kind. The result is movement, gentle, deliberate, sometimes slow, but undeniably real. Early prosthetic systems required the user to contract residual muscles to trigger motion. But BCIs have made it possible to bypass muscle entirely, drawing movement from pure thought. For someone with a spinal cord injury, this means they can now operate an exoskeleton, a wearable robotic frame, by simply imagining themselves walking. Step by step, the machine responds, turning silent willpower into gentle action. These prosthetic limbs are more than machines. They are extensions of self. Break, time one use, and the more intuitive the interface, the more natural the motion becomes. Engineers have designed hands with fingers that open and close based on motor imagery alone. Some include sensors that deliver feedback, allowing the user not just to move, but to feel the texture of an object or the firmness of a grip. It's not just about function. It's about restoration of dignity, of independence, of identity. The training process is a quiet collaboration between user and system. The person learns to focus their thoughts, often beginning with simple goals: open, close, lift. Over time, these commands become fluid, almost second nature. At the same time, the BCI refines its ability to interpret the user's signals, adjusting for fatigue, emotional state, and even ambient distractions. And what's more, the benefits aren't only physical. Users often describe a feeling of reconnection, not just to the world, but to themselves. To move again, even through a robotic limb, is to reclaim a sense of presence. A sense of selfhood that had felt paused, now continuing with calm grace. Some systems go even further, allowing users to perform delicate tasks like feeding themselves, typing, or brushing their hair. And while the technology is still evolving, the direction is clear. The goal is not to replace what was lost, but to reawaken what still lives within. Because in truth, movement never really disappears. It simply waits, curled softly in the folds of the mind, ready to rise again when someone listens closely enough. In the hush of early morning, before the world begins to stir, there is a special kind of stillness. In that quiet, you might picture someone sitting peacefully, eyes open, body at rest, yet mind alive with intention. They are not moving, but they are traveling. Not walking, but they are guiding. And beside them, a wheelchair hums gently forward, turning when they think of turning, pausing when they think of pause. This is the gentle power of brain-computer interface-assisted mobility, where stillness and motion coexist, and the mind alone becomes the compass. Traditional motorized wheelchairs require hands, joysticks, or voice commands to navigate. But for many, these means are unavailable. Whether due to injury, illness, or degenerative disease, the pathways between intention and action can be interrupted. Yet the intention itself remains intact. The desire to move, to explore, to go outside and feel the sun, these live quietly in the mind. Brain-computer interfaces listen for these intentions. Using EEG caps or implanted sensors, BCIs can detect signals related to imagined movement, such as the thought of turning left or moving forward. The system maps these signals to directional commands, allowing the user to steer their wheelchair with thought alone. It's not about direct control, like manipulating a joystick. It's about guiding the system, like sailing a boat with wind and rudder, softly influencing its path with focus. Safety is built into every step. These BCI-driven wheelchairs are often programmed to avoid obstacles, stop automatically when needed, and slow down around corners. The user does not need to micromanage every motion. Instead, they partner with the machine, offering high-level guidance while the system takes care of the details. It is a gentle collaboration. Beyond wheelchairs, BCIs are also being used to control robotic arms in homes and hospitals. With a simple thought, a person can bring a cup of tea to their lips, adjust a blanket, or press a button on a remote. These tasks, though small, are deeply meaningful. They restore a sense of autonomy, a quiet return of control. Some advanced systems combine BCIs with eye tracking or subtle facial movements to improve accuracy and reduce fatigue. Others allow for asynchronous control, where the user can activate the interface only when needed, resting their mind the rest of the time. This is key, because even thought-driven movement can be tiring. And BCIs are designed to respect that, to work not by demanding effort, but by supporting ease. What emerges is a new kind of mobility, one not bound by muscle, but shaped by presence. Not rushed, but steady. A mobility that unfolds as naturally as thought itself. And in that stillness, where the body is quiet but the world begins to move, there is something beautifully profound. A reminder that movement is not only physical, it begins inside us, as an intention, as a direction, as a hope. And with the help of gentle technology, that hope becomes motion. In the still hours of the night, when thought floats freely and time stretches like soft silk across the mind, one question often rises like mist. Where do I end? And where does the world begin? It's a quiet inquiry, one that doesn't seek urgent answers, but invites gentle reflection. And as brain-computer interfaces draw the mind ever closer to the machine, this question becomes both more intimate and more profound. We are accustomed to thinking of ourselves as separate from the tools we use. A pen in the hand is just that, a tool. A smartphone in our pocket is an accessory. But what happens when the boundary softens? When the interface is no longer held, but worn or placed within? When the thoughts that shape a device's response are not typed or spoken, but silently formed within the folds of our own mind? With BCIs, the line between the internal and external begins to blur. A robotic arm moved by thought, a cursor gliding with intention, a message written with imagined speech. These are no longer just mechanical functions. They are expressions of self. They originate from the same wellspring as our dreams, our memories, our identities. This merging raises soft but weighty questions. Is a movement still ours if it is made by a machine? Is a word truly spoken if no breath passes through vocal cords? When a robotic limb becomes as natural to use as a biological one, is it part of the body or something else entirely? Many users of advanced BCIs report a sensation not of using a tool, but of extending themselves. A prosthetic hand, once clumsy, becomes part of their reach. A robotic assistant, once unfamiliar, becomes an extension of their will. The self, it seems, is not a fixed shape, but a field, one that can expand and adapt, given the right conditions. Philosophers have long wondered whether the mind is confined to the skull, or whether it flows outward, shaped by what we interact with. The theory of the extended mind suggests that our tools, when used fluently and repeatedly, become part of our cognitive process. A notebook becomes part of memory. A calculator becomes part of reasoning. And now, with BCIs, machines are becoming part of movement, part of language, even part of perception. But this isn't a story of loss. It's not that we're becoming machines, or machines are becoming human. It's something quieter, a soft joining, a harmony, a blending of systems designed to support, to assist, to enhance, not to replace. In truth, the self has always been something dynamic. We change from day to day, from moment to moment. our bodies change. Our thoughts change. Our tools change. And yet, something within us, our awareness, our intention, remains a thread through it all. Brain-computer interfaces don't erase that thread. They simply weave new patterns with it. They allow the self to reach farther, express more, connect in ways that were once impossible. And so, when we ask where we end, the answer may be softer than we thought. Perhaps we end not at the skin, but at the edge of where we are heard, where our thoughts can be felt, shared, understood. Perhaps we end not at the body, but at the point where the mind still moves, and where someone or something still listens. Imagine your thoughts as drifting lanterns, each one lit quietly within, set adrift into a vast open sky. Some float nearby. Some rise higher, catching warm currents of curiosity and wonder. Others disappear beyond the horizon, carrying pieces of yourself into places unseen. With brain-computer interfaces, these lanterns are no longer confined. They are given wings, pathways, and gentle direction. And as they float farther, we begin to see what it means to think without boundaries. Traditionally, thought has been a private act. Hidden. Silent. Its influence depended on expression through speech, writing, action. But BCIs suggest a future where thought, in its rawest form, might reach outward directly. No need for typing or talking. No need for translation. Just thought, becoming. This idea isn't about speed or convenience. It's not a race to produce more or move faster. It's about something quieter, something deeper. It's about making space for those who have been silenced by illness, by injury, by time. It's about honoring the presence of thought, even when the body cannot follow. And yet, it's also about opening new windows for all of us. Imagine creating art not with brush or chisel, but with emotion itself. Imagine composing music by feeling its rhythm in your chest. Imagine sharing a memory, not as a story told, but as a sensation felt together. BCIs invite us to dream of these possibilities, not with urgency, but with care. They suggest that the borders between mind and world can be softened, that our inner lives, so rich and complex, might find new ways to reach each other, new ways to connect, to comfort, to collaborate. Already, scientists are exploring ways BCIs might allow people to co-create a shared digital canvas painted by collective thought, or to feel empathy more directly by gently sensing each other's emotional patterns. These are distant visions, fragile and forming. But even in their distance, they feel like stars worth reaching for. Of course, such expansions come with questions about privacy, about consent, about the sanctity of thought. But tonight we set those questions gently aside, not to ignore them, but to rest from them, to simply imagine the peaceful possibilities. In a world shaped by BCIs, thought might become more than a tool. It might become a language of presence, a way to say I am here without raising a hand, a way to listen more deeply, to speak more softly, to share more fully. Perhaps in this world, a person's essence is not measured by how loudly they speak or how far they travel, but by the calm beauty of their intentions, by the quiet clarity of their inner light. And perhaps, when our tools are built to reflect that gentleness, our world becomes more peaceful, more thoughtful, more human. In this vision, we do not become machines. We become more ourselves, freer to feel, freer to connect, freer to think and to be heard. The future doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it tiptoes in quietly, like the first rays of dawn slipping over the horizon, painting the sky in soft promise. The story of brain-computer interfaces is one such sunrise. Slowly, steadily, it brightens, bringing with it possibilities not through disruption, but through calm evolution. And as we gaze gently forward, we begin to see where this path might lead. Tomorrow's BCIs may not look like the caps and arrays we've seen today. They may be simpler, subtler, woven into fabric, embedded beneath the skin like threads of thought. Advances in nanotechnology and flexible materials suggest a future where interfaces conform to the body's natural rhythm, moving with it rather than against it. The clunky hardware may disappear. What remains is the connection, the mind's whisper, effortlessly heard. We may see BCIs that require no conscious effort at all. Systems that learn your patterns over time, anticipating your needs before you voice them. Imagine a chair adjusting to your posture the moment discomfort stirs, or a screen dimming the moment your focus begins to waver. These are not grand revolutions. They're quiet comforts, subtle supports, thoughtful gestures from devices designed not to dominate, but to understand. In clinical care, BCIs may become personalized healers. Devices that monitor mental fatigue, detect signs of depression or anxiety, and gently offer support, whether through neurofeedback, guided rest, or soft stimulation. For those recovering from injury, BCIs may help retrain the brain itself, guiding neurons to forge new paths, restoring function where once there was silence. Education, too, may shift. Imagine learning environments that respond to your engagement, not punishing distraction, but gently encouraging curiosity. A BCI might recognize when a student feels overwhelmed, offering a moment to pause, to breathe, to reflect. Learning, after all, isn't a race. It's a journey, just like this one. And in the creative world, we may see tools shaped by emotion itself. Artists drawing directly from mood. Musicians playing chords composed by inner feeling. Writers dreaming aloud through neural ink. The mind as canvas. The machine as quiet brush. As these systems grow more intuitive, the lines between user and interface may fade even further. A person might not think about using a device. They might simply think, and the device responds. Not magic. Not control. Just harmony. And what of society? Perhaps BCIs will help build a more inclusive world, where communication is not limited by language, where physical limitations no longer restrict connection, where emotion and intent are seen, heard, honored. Of course, none of this is certain. Predictions, no matter how softly spoken, are still glimpses through fog. But the direction is gentle, hopeful, kind. BCIs are not about becoming something other than human. They're about expanding what it means to be human. About making space for quiet voices, hidden thoughts, and inner lives that deserve to be shared. And so, as we look forward, not with urgency, but with wonder, we see a future quietly forming. One shaped by empathy, by care, by thought made visible. A future not rushed into, but welcomed, step by gentle step. There is something timeless about dreaming together, when ideas float between people like clouds passing through a shared sky. In conversation, in song, in silent understanding, we touch one another not with hands, but with thought. As brain-computer interfaces continue to evolve, some imagine a world where this shared sky expands, where thoughts, still private and peaceful, might drift gently between minds, shaping a quiet collective of connection. This is not the stuff of science fiction, but of science whispered forward. Researchers are beginning to explore how multiple brains might interface through coordinated BCIs, forming what some call brain-to-brain communication. In early experiments, signals from one person's brain were translated into commands sent directly to another's through digital pathways, not spoken language. Break, time 1.0. The result, small, subtle transmissions. A shared game move. A transferred choice. A nod from one mind to another, without a word between them. It is not mind reading. It is not invasion. It is a soft conversation, like tuning instruments to the same key. Each mind remains whole. Each thought, sovereign. And yet, a new kind of resonance begins to emerge. In a more practical form, empathic BCIs may someday help us understand one another on a deeper level. Devices that read emotional patterns, stress, calm, curiosity, overwhelm, could offer companions and caregivers a gentle window into what someone is feeling, especially when words are lost. Imagine a world where your sighs don't go unnoticed, where your quiet struggles are supported, not with judgment, but with warmth. Teachers might know when students need a break. Doctors might better sense a patient's pain. Loved ones might connect across great distances, sensing one another's presence not through a screen, but through shared attention, shared peace. These connections don't require constant transmission. They don't mean giving up privacy or solitude. They simply suggest a future where our devices don't just respond to our commands, but attune to our needs. Where technology becomes a companion, not just a tool. In this future, we may design spaces that adapt to our thoughts, lights dimming with relaxation, music changing with mood, environments that softly mirror our inner state. Not to distract, but to soothe. Not to control, but to comfort. And what of creativity? Perhaps entire symphonies will one day be composed by groups of minds working in harmony, blending intentions and feelings into a single, flowing work. Perhaps stories will be told by collectives, not just authors. Shared dreams woven into gentle narratives that stretch across time and place. This is a future still unfolding, and one we must shape with care. Trust, ethics, and mutual respect will be the compass by which we navigate it. But within the quiet spaces of our minds, the longing to connect has always been there. BCIs may simply be one more bridge, a soft, shimmering thread between hearts. Because in the end, thought is not something we hold. It's something we share. And when we share it with kindness, with empathy, with intention, we begin to build something beautiful. Not a machine, not a network, but a shared dream. And now, as our journey draws to a close, let's return, softly, slowly, to where we began. You are still lying on that quiet hillside beneath the stars. The earth beneath you is warm and steady. The sky stretches wide above, not dark, but deep, like a velvet sea of thought, gently stirred by the winds of wonder. Around you, nothing rushes. The night is still, and the mind, once filled with flickering questions and far-off dreams, now rests in a gentle hush. We've wandered together through the quiet folds of the brain, its neurons glowing like distant stars, its thoughts like soft tides washing the shores of consciousness. We've listened to how scientists have learned to hear these inner rhythms, not by breaking in, but by sitting still, by waiting, by listening. We've traced the early bridges between thought and machine, first small, tentative steps, flickers of control, whispers from the surface of the scalp, then deeper, more intimate connections, signals sent in, not just out, the return of sensation, the restoration of voice. We've walked gently through lives touched by BCIs, those who cannot speak, now able to write their thoughts. Those who cannot move, now guiding machines with the calm force of will alone. We've seen how prosthetics can extend the body, how imagined words can become sentences, how stillness can be a source of motion. And then we drifted further still, into reflections, into wonderings. Where does the self end, when thought can reach beyond the body? What happens when minds connect, not through sound or touch, but through shared attention, shared light? What possibilities open when technology listens, not only to what we say, but to how we feel? But here, in the quiet of the wind down, we set those questions aside, not with dismissal, but with trust. The future will arrive softly, in its own time. And tonight, there is no need to reach for it. We have arrived exactly where we need to be. With a breath, with stillness, with thought. You may find yourself feeling a bit lighter now. Not because the world has changed, but because the weight of wondering has turned into something gentler. A soft openness, a calm curiosity. Like watching the stars and knowing you don't need to name them to feel their glow. Perhaps you feel closer to your own thoughts, or more at peace with their quiet movement. They do not rush. They do not shout. They simply flow, like light across water, like wind through trees, like intention itself, unspoken but understood. So as you rest here, held by night and story and the steady breath of being, know that your mind is not a mystery to be solved. It is a song to be heard, a light to be seen, a presence that needs nothing more than space and silence and care. Let go now. Drift a little deeper. Let the neurons flicker without thought, like stars in a sky that watches over you endlessly. You are heard. You are safe. You are home. Thank you for joining me on tonight's journey. I hope it brought you a little peace, a little wonder, and a little closer to rest. Until next time, sweet dreams.